All right, how are you all set to go?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see everyone this morning. I would like to call this morning's meeting to order. The time is now 10:01. Stephanie, would you mind taking attendance, please?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Adrian Cochran has not joined us yet. Andrea Comer,
Present.
Ellen McKitterick,
Present.
John Scott,
I am here.
Mike Saltis,
Present.
and Holly Williams.
Present.
All right, we have a quorum.
Thank you. I would like to thank the members of the public for joining us this morning, and we will transition to item number 2 on our agenda. I would like to ask the committee for a review of the June 28th, 2024 minutes and call to approve.
Move to approve the minutes.
Thank you. And a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain. I wasn't present.
Thank you. All right, the motion carries. Thank you all. And we also need to do a review and approval of the minutes from the July 26th meeting. So I'd like to ask the committee for a review of the July 26th, 2024 meeting minutes and a call to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. And a second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Thank you. Any opposed? No. Any abstentions?
Also abstaining.
Thank you both. So the motion carries. And we're moving along to item number 4 on our agenda, a discussion about the contribution rate update, and Erin is going to lead us in that discussion.
Thank you so much, Holly. Just trying to get to slideshow mode. So to start, we wanted to provide you with the information that has been requested at a couple of the past meetings. But first, just as a reminder, one of the statutory authorities is to ensure that we collect contributions such that the trust fund balance is sufficient to ensure our ongoing ability to pay the fund, for the fund to pay the benefits, and to limit the need for contribution rate increases or benefit reductions. So just to keep that present in our minds. First, some data that has been requested. I think this was a request from John Scott. Basically a question of how are we doing in terms of the percentage of benefit recipients in the 3 categories, above the eligibility standard, but less than 40 times the Connecticut minimum wage, between 40 and 60 times the Connecticut minimum wage, and folks who are at the max, so 60 times the Connecticut minimum wage. And comparing that to what we can get from DOL in terms of overall Connecticut worker population in those same categories. So not a lot of changes, as you can see. We are underrepresented in the folks who earn more than 60 times Connecticut minimum wage, which is to be expected because generally high income earners have other resources. So we do expect that that will be a lower number. We are overrepresented in the 40 to 60 times Connecticut minimum wage, and a little underrepresented in the less than 40 times Connecticut minimum wage, although I'm pleased to see that we're growing in that category, which tells me that I think our outreach is having an impact, and we're hoping that our community education coordinator initiative will continue to make sure that folks who are earning the lowest amounts do know about the program and are able to access it. So John, as I said, I think this was a request from you. Is there anything that you were hoping for that this doesn't share?
Working multiple screens here. Sorry.
No worries.
So yeah, I think it does. I think what I was trying to visualize though, so we're at a certain percentage of income up to a maximum of roughly $900. Is that correct?
I think it's $942 and some cents, but yeah.
Okay, so obviously the higher wage earners are going to be nailing that. So I think you're in the right track. I guess I was looking to see like what are we actually paying? Like so if they're closer to the let me think this out, talking out loud here. So if they're a lower waged earner, what is the maximum they're getting versus the actual max of the program, and how is that
Oh.
impacting our actuarials?
Gotcha. So as we said, if you're at the 60 times Connecticut minimum wage or higher, you get paid out at that 60 times the Connecticut minimum wage. So the maximum weekly benefit is about $940 a week. If you are less than 40 times Connecticut minimum wage, the benefit payment is of your aggregated earning, where we look at the highest 2 quarters in the base period added together, divide by 26. So it is a little tricky to show. I think our average benefit payment for 2024 was about 700 and some dollars. So it's a little hard to kind of show what folks are earning just because it varies so much. But I know that with the actuaries, they do take into consideration kind of that weighted average when assessing what we should be expecting for our benefit payments.
But at the end of the day, the greater than 50% of the people making claims are getting the $940 and change.
Correct.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, this is helpful. That's kind of a good number to have. Thank you.
Sure. All right. This is just the same information presented differently, so you can see kind of graphically what that looks like. So I think, Holly, you had asked about kind of creating a baseline to compare our claims against unemployment rate, just to see if there's any sort of correlation. As you can tell from this sort of spaghetti map, we don't really see one. But we'll continue to track this using DOL information so that we can kind of see if anything starts appearing once we get more quarters under our belt.
Okay, that sounds good. At least at least knowing that the two are dissociated is information in and of itself. But I'm glad to see that, you know, you'll track it over a longer period of time to see if that correlation changes.
Absolutely. It's sort of interesting in and of itself, but it's just hard to draw any conclusions with this.
Yeah, this is a great, that's a great graph, actually.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Sure. And then we wanted to just continue sharing what we're seeing in terms of the benefit amounts that we pay every week. As we've shared in the past, it definitely is growing. Some of that's due to changes in the minimum wage, which affects obviously our benefit payments, but some of it's also due, of course, to the growth in claims. We saw a 7% increase, over 7% increase in claims in 2024 compared to 2023 fiscal years. So we're just showing this. The spiky line is the actuals in millions in terms of how much we pay per week, and then you can see the trend line. So we're right now we're above trend, and we'll continue to keep a close eye to see what this does. We don't know if it's going to kind of have that summer spike and then go back down in the fall or what, but we're keeping a close eye, and we'll continue to share this information with you as we go. I can't see anyone, so if you do want to say anything, just sing out. Okay. One of the things, you can't see that it says sensitivity analysis on my screen, but this is the other request, was just to do that sort of sensitivity analysis in terms of what might happen with alternative scenarios. What happens if so the baseline is sort of what we with our actuaries are anticipating for the next 10 years, right? So that's the baseline. That's what we've been kind of operating under. But what happens if our assumptions are off and claims increase by 5%? What will that bring us? What happens if the claims decrease by 5%? What happens if the contributions are higher than we expect? What happens if the contributions decrease by 5%, which mathematically is also the same as if we reduce the contribution rate to 0.475. And then what happens if we have claims increase and contributions decrease? So, you know, we do see some fluctuations in the 10-year projections based on these different alternative scenarios, but we wanted you to be aware that this is something we're looking at. And I have a graph for this one as well to show kind of what we anticipate seeing, with the green being the baseline. Obviously, things that show a higher amount are when we talk about either contributions increasing because we have more workers or claims decreasing. And the dark blue line shows contributions decreasing by 5%, either because there are fewer employees working and therefore contributing, or if we reduce the contribution rate.
So one thing that I would just say is it might be helpful if maybe you just make that notation about the 4.5% on the scenarios as well, just to make sure that when as this contribution rate conversation evolves and people are looking at this graph, they can equate the two.
Sure.
Yeah, I just think that'd be helpful for any other, external stakeholders that may look at it.
Certainly. So, which is a great segue into, unless anyone has any other questions or want to say anything else about sort of the data that we've compiled based on your requests, we wanted to transition into talking about the contribution rate itself, because this is what the board will be talking about at the September board meeting. As you all know, we adopted the contribution rate policy in August, so just sort of putting that out there for everyone's reminder. When you see my screen, do you see, whoops, there we go. Just want to make sure you see that 708. So we have that policy. In conjunction with the policy, we also developed that mathematical formula for saying, okay, we know that we've got metrics for our solvency, which is sort of like the minimum. How do we determine if we have enough of a surplus that we would feel justified in making changes to the contribution rate? And the formula we developed in this committee that the board has accepted sort of looks at what we need to do is look at a 10-year period. Where is the fund projected to be at the end of 10 years? And then how much we need to have at sort of year 10 so that we could not only cover our expected costs, but also have enough in the reserves to account for multiple years of low contributions and higher claims. And using that formula that we've talked about over the past several months, we would need $708 million in the fund in 2034 to sort of be in a position where we would feel that we have a true surplus beyond sort of the necessary, and therefore we could consider reducing the rate. We anticipate that at the end of 10 years, we're going to have $676 million in the trust fund, so less than that amount. And then the orange shows what we would see in the trust fund if we were to reduce the contribution rate to 0.475. Just again, to kind of visually depict the impact that would have on the trust fund. So we just wanted to share that because this leads us to our recommendation that the contribution rate should continue to stay at that 0.5%, because we don't want to decrease the rate and then jeopardize the reserve, and continue to monitor claim and contribution data to see if the growth in claims levels out or continues at where we expect it to be, and to maintain looking at our contributions to see kind of, are they continuing to come in as expected? Would anyone like to see any of the slides again before I stop sharing?
Yes, can you go back to that last graph?
Yep.
So this curve here, the orange line, is assuming that we could drop it to 4.5% permanently.
Well, 4.475.
Okay.
So, and yes, so if we reduce it and don't change it again, that's what the orange line is.
Because I guess, this is going to be an annual discussion. I'm just wondering if there's another way to reflect, like if we just do 1 year at a lower amount, decide we were dumb in doing it and bring it back up to 5, what's the overall impact? Or maybe we find that we were spot on. I don't know. It's just, these actuarial decisions are hard to read into sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically for every year that it's reduced, it's about a 25 to $30 million hit. Is that correct?
Right, right. If you look towards the left of the graph and you look at the first blue and orange dots together, you'll see it's about a 25 or $30 million difference. So if we just changed it for the 1 year and then kept it back up to 0.5%, then we'd be at roughly about $650 million in 10 years.
And they're saying that we need to have 708 million in the trust fund in 2034.
So the 708 million is based on the calculation that we've been talking about since March, I guess, where we've talked about what would we need to have as reserves to be able to weather. I always struggle with this because they're not unforeseen events if we're anticipating them, but what would we need to have in the reserves if we had multiple years of, I think it's 3 years of lower contributions and 2 years of higher claims. So that's the formula that we developed as a committee with Spring's advice in terms of sort of how to forecast if difficult years. And if you think back to, I guess it was probably April or May, where we talked about all the different scenarios in terms of looking at the past and the recessions and things that Connecticut has weathered. That was what we developed for that formula. And so that 708 is the end of 10 years, we would need that kind of money in our reserves to be able to weather a couple years of lower than anticipated contributions and higher than anticipated claims.
Okay. I guess I'm thinking out loud here, but $30 million extracted from the Connecticut economy is a heck of a lot of money.
So
we're not
again,
saying that we're
not
going to have.
technically extracted because it is invested.
Yeah, it's not in people's wallets though. That's the thing. I mean, you're taking it, and I know that we're talking maybe like $1 a week or something like that, but it does add up depending on what people are making. But
It's not even $1 a week for most people. So for folks at minimum wage, we looked at it last year, and it would reducing the contribution rate to 0.475 would result in less than $10 at the end of a year. And for folks at the maximum, it was about $50. So it is less than $1 a week.
Well, a lot of money. I'm not comfortable sitting on $700 million if we're not paying out $700 million in claims in a year, which I don't see us doing either.
But we're not sitting on $700 million. That is an estimate of where we would be at the end of 10 years.
Well, all right, that's right. But we're still estimated to sit on, the actuaries are usually pretty spot on with some of this stuff. So if we stayed at 0.5, we would be sitting on, what was that number, 640 million roughly?
The trust fund balance would be about $640 million at the end of 10 years. But bear in mind that our claims are growing.
Mhm.
So with the growth, and we talked about this in August, with the growth, we're actually getting closer to break even at the 600 and something million point. Even this year, you know, we've paid out over $800 million in the 2.5 years we've been paying benefits, right? So I think it is important to bear in mind that we want to make sure we have some reserves, because we don't want to be in a position where we're relying on, you know, making just enough money in the contributions to be able to pay our bills each year. That, you know, we don't want to have a whole lot of extra money, but we do want to make sure that we're not teetering into not being able to pay our bills, because we have no other safety net, right? No one in Connecticut is going to be giving us $200 million like they did in Washington State.
But would they, you know, legislatively though, would they argue? Well, I get that the state of Connecticut probably wouldn't make a contribution to our fund if we ran short, but would we have the option of asking for them to give us more than 0.5% if we got into a pickle?
That's a statutory change. Like, you
Right.
know, the statute says the contribution rate is 0.5%. The statute also says that the only thing we can do if we are running into difficulties with our fund would be to reduce the benefits. And we can only reduce the benefits if we're at the contribution max.
All right. Well, I mean, all the taxes in Connecticut are cumulative, and that's, you know, just add another 0.5 point on top of what we're paying for income taxes and things like that. It adds up at the end of the day. So that's why I'm bristling a little bit, just to see if there isn't a way, or if we shouldn't consider just a small reduction, even though it, you know, people visually won't see it being, you know, more than maybe $1. But it just the concept of, okay, we've reduced a tax somewhere in Connecticut, I think is meaningful. That's my thought on it.
No, I mean, I appreciate your perspective. I understand it. I just am really wary of doing anything that would jeopardize the solvency of the fund and our ability to pay the benefits. Given that we are still, you know, 2.5 years in, usually you want a 3 to 5 year claim history before you have any sort of assurances. And we're growing. I mean, we keep paying out more money every week. That I think that's important to just kind of pay attention to. You know, so
If I may,
of course.
and John, again, you know, I too appreciate your thoughts on this, and I understand sort of the tax burden that, you know, we all kind of bear. I think I'm struck by a few things. One is what Erin stated about how much it actually ends up being, like less than $10 a year for folks at the lower threshold, who, by the way, this is intended to benefit, right? I mean, we have our benefits. A lot of times folks who are higher earners have access to benefits. This is for, you know, our baristas and our fast food workers who do not have access and have to make really difficult choices about whether they care for themselves or care for their loved ones, or go to work. And it's, you know, it's a real issue for so many. You know, the other thing I think about is nobody, with maybe some few research scientists, saw the pandemic coming. And I am not entirely convinced that we won't face that kind of an epidemic and a global incident again. In which case, you know, we're going to have significant numbers of people who are ill, thus multiplying the need for a benefit like this. So I guess I just look at it from a broader perspective, but I certainly appreciate the, you know, sort of the tax burden aspect of it. Thanks.
I wanted to just kind of weigh in on this as well, kind of piggybacking off of what you just said, Andrea, which is the other thing I think is that I think that, you know, the fund has benefited from an unprecedented economic cycle, and we haven't quite, like, I know that the graph on the lack of correlation between unemployment and claims was comical at its outset, but I don't think we've begun to actually see what the back end of this economic cycle looks at, if it functions like a true recessionary period or if we go into another boom. I think, you know, I have a dear friend who's an economist, and she always loves to tell me that it's so fun being an economist because so frequently you're wrong, right? Because you're putting a projection out there, but the sentiment of that is that I think we're not sure what we're looking at. So even in a perfect time where the economic cycle is mirroring what you would expect to see on a 10-year trend, I think being more cautious than people maybe are comfortable with is kind of a prudent path forward. I know that, you know, the short-term investment fund had historic returns that we hadn't seen. I mean, usually you're under 1% for that fund, but we've had yields in the 4 or 5%, which the paid leave fund has benefited from in ways I don't think we will see over the long term, or I wouldn't anticipate seeing over the long term. And then the last thing that I would say is, and I think this merits more discussion, not now, but, you know, as we kind of transition through the next year or so, is whether or not we need to have an earnest conversation about the benefits that we pay out. So the value of what people are getting out of the fund is aligned with what they're paying in over the expected life of the payment period. Because if the metrics demonstrate that there's a disconnect between what you're paying in and what you're getting out, that I think merits conversation as well when we talk about tinkering with the contribution rate, because the conversation, we might want to go down the road where we talk about, is it time to change the benefits that are being paid out given the contribution rate that we're at, still being mindful of fund solvency. But that's kind of the other side, I think, of you know, the contribution conversation. Do we bring the contribution rate down just from what people are paying in, or do we tinker with the benefits to make sure that what they're buying from the fund is really really aligned with what they're paying in? So I think those two conversations have to happen at some point in the future. So that's kind of my thoughts on the matter.
If I may, that actually brings another thought to mind. If you look at, Aaron, can you bring your presentation back up
Sure.
and go to the page where we were talking about the percentages at different wage levels?
This page?
Nope. Yeah, this one, exactly. So so the average is 53% are hitting the maximum $940 and change. So I guess, do we have any way of tracking, you know, if someone is applying and getting that $940, how short are they of their actual weekly compensation?
So I don't think we have that information, but I will say that the birth to three, the prenatal to three organization down at Vanderbilt did an analysis last summer, and we can look at it and try and update it, that did what Holly was asking in terms of looking at how much you pay in versus your likely benefit. And we were right in the middle, like we were pretty even. So we were right in the middle of the paid leave states, but we were also pretty even in terms of how much you put in versus how much you get out. And that's because our contributions are capped at the Social Security contribution rate. So even though we don't really measure full wage replacement, we've never been a full wage replacement program. And part of that.
And I'm not saying
Yeah.
we should be, though, but when someone is applying for benefits, they have to prove what their wages are. So from that information, shouldn't we be able to extrapolate that, you know, someone's making $2,000 a week, but they're only getting 940? Or
Yeah, I mean, it is something we could start doing. It's not something we've done so far. So just to be clear there.
Yeah, it's there's moving parts to this, and I get it. I guess
Yeah.
I'm not I'd like to see some numbers about, that kind of impact before we talk about increasing the benefit. It's just interesting the populations of people. Andrea, I agree with you that we should be trying to get the lower wage earners to have benefit on this, but I think it's fascinating that that's only 14% of what's paid out. So
Well-
what's happening in that area, that population of people?
Right, but
not finding
the
out.
population is 21% of the workforce, so it's not. So really, we're trying to get close to 21%.
So then we're not far off from capturing the whole group then, is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, yeah, we're not trying to say that the 14% should be compared to the 20.9%, is basically what I'm saying.
All right. Okay, I'm sure I have more questions. That was just my thought process.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I know Holly made the suggestion that we kind of clarify scenario 4 as also being what would happen if we reduce the contribution rate, which I can do. Is there anything else that you think would be useful for us to bring to the board when we have this conversation at the board level? The full board.
This is designed to be an annual conversation, but yet we're projecting out over, 10-year period, assuming we would not adjust it again the following year. I guess I would need a few minutes over the next couple weeks before we have our regular meeting to kind of stare at these numbers to see what jumps off the page at me as far as a way to look at this differently.
Of course, we'll share this with everybody. So you'll have it. And as I said, we would just, if there's other information that you think would be helpful for the full board as we have this discussion with them. We just want to make sure that we're kind of building off of the work we've been doing really since March, and most of the work that you all at this committee have been doing. So we really appreciate that
I think this
effort.
has been good work. Initially I did want, it just bothered me as we were seeing the, numbers accumulate over time and then projecting out to have so much money that just seemed like a heck of a lot of money that we're taking again out of the Connecticut economy in some respects to cover this benefit. But then when we start seeing the claim change, it's like, all right, so where's the right answer in here? Is should we be, like there's certain aspects of other state government, whether it's unemployment wages, things like that, those numbers change on an annual basis, or at least they used to when I ran my own business. And some of it was based on the amount of claims your business had, but other parts of it, you could have years where you didn't have anybody terminated and collecting, but you still had that base rate change based on other factors, such as whether the federal government didn't reimburse the state of Connecticut for certain aspects of things. There was all kinds of other moving parts, but it was always an annual conversation. It seemed like what that aspect of your expenses were as a business owner. So, what's wrong with taking a year and marking it 5% off the previous year, and then in 2026 we have another conversation. Well, that was done. Let's bring it back to 5, or maybe that was spot on. We can leave it there or drop it down a little bit more. I feel like leaving it at 5% may not be the right answer.
Sure.
Or half a point.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I would feel a whole lot more comfortable if we could ever go above 0.5%, because we can't recover, right? That's why I'm so conservative on this, is that we can't recover if we went too low.
But do you think the legislature would really leave us swinging in the wind if we really truly made a mistake? I mean, it's Democrat controlled, and this was their idea and their dream, so they've got it. I'm not saying that we're making a bad decision, but hey, we're human. We can make mistakes, and then what happens if we have made a mistake? If we made it too far along, would the legislature bail us out by letting us go higher?
I guess what my thought is, especially given the continuing, and I anticipate will become extremely robust conversation around the guardrails this legislative session. I would be I'd be interested to revisit that question after this legislative session, because I think that we've got a lot of, Democrats who are actually, I would say, bipartisan, asking for us to loosen up the reins a little bit, right? Because we've got nonprofits who are saying, you've got all this money and we're struggling. And so I think that's a long way of saying, I'm not so sure.
Hmm. Yeah, I hear you. I've been serving the legislature. I know it's kind of every 2 years the animal changes because you get new faces and different percentages of balance between Democrats and Republicans. But I don't know. Just speaking out loud, I think this is a conversation. We're effectively a taxing authority. This body that we're all here on. So I think it's responsible for us to kind of talk things out and think things through. And I almost feel like it's irresponsible to leave it alone. The legislature tweaks the tax rates based on certain brackets year over year, so maybe we should be doing the same kind of thing. I don't know. But I think
Can I jump in here just for a
Sure.
minute? Because I need to leave at 10:45. Number one, I think it's terrific we're having this conversation. This is the first year we're doing this, and I think it's a very responsible conversation to have. Number two, we decided on an approach, which we looked at with the numbers, and John asked, are there other approaches? Yeah, there are other approaches, right? I mean, we could determine what we need based on a percent of last year's claims, 130%, 150%. There's all kinds of, we could pick whatever number we want. But I'm in favor of giving the approach we agreed to a chance to work. In a perfect world, we would just take in what we pay out, right? That would be the perfect world. It's never going to get there. We could talk about catastrophes. We could talk about plagues. Who knows what the future holds? But I think given where we are, 2.5 years of paying out claims, our upward trajectory, I, for one, am comfortable leaving it as it is this year, doing the same level of analysis every year. To John's question, would it be such a bad idea if we reduce it? I don't think it would. I mean, I don't think anything catastrophic is going to happen, but I'm comfortable where we are in the stage of our development as a authority. So that's where my vote would be.
Thank you, Mike.
And I am going to sign off in 2 minutes.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mike. We appreciate your time
All
this
right.
morning. Does anybody else have any comments for Erin and her team this morning?
do we
Anything
lose
else?
a quorum if we lose Mike? Do we have to vote on something?
We do not
Uh,
lose the quorum. We're good.
Okay, then I'll sign off.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
All right.
And our final motion would have been on adjournment anyways. But all right, well, if there's not any further discussion on this update, then we're going to move to the budget review of spending to date.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Where'd it go? I too had a Teams update, Holly, so of course it moves things around. I'm just trying to make sure I find the right thing.
We can see your
Okay.
screen, Dave.
Thank you for the confirmation. Okay, so we are going to share, excuse me, we are going to share our results for the month of July. This is a new fiscal year. The fiscal year ended 12 months, June of 2025. July is the first month of that fiscal year. So we're showing you 1 month of the fiscal year. So we're just going to show the month-to-date results because they would be the same as the year-to-date results. So if the number of columns looks smaller, that's why. Didn't want to show duplicative information. Having said that, The operating results for the month of July were just under $4.1 million compared to a budget of $3.6 million. So we were ahead of budget by $493,000. Our expenses for the month were $937,000. Again, those were just a little under $500,000 better than budget. The main expenses were payroll and related expenses of $660,000, contact center of $129,000, and outreach of $89,000. So the typical expense categories for the month of July. Bond money, we didn't actually spend any bond money this month. That will change. We know we've already spent some in the coming month of, or actually I should say the prior month of August. It's September already. But for the month of July, nothing was spent. So we're ahead of budget because of that. And we still have about $2.4 million, just under that, of bond funds available to the authority for use, which we will be using. Contribution activity for the month of July. July is the month when the bulk of the contributions come in for the second quarter. So our net activity was almost $78.9 million. That was somewhat under the budget of $80.0 million. So we were under budget by $1.1 million. The main driver of that negative variance was benefit payments. We have budgeted $28.3 million, but the actual amount that came in was $32.7 million. And that's because of the reasons that Erin mentioned before. We've seen an uptick in the last few months in the summer of benefit activity. We're averaging about $8.2 million a week. That's a record high. So as Erin had recommended before, we are monitoring that and seeing what kind of trend that may be on a go-forward basis. Having said that, that negative variance was offset by a positive contribution variance of $2.5 million for the month, as well as a positive investment income variance of $603,000 because we earned $2.5 million of investment income. As Holly had indicated before, the interest rate we're earning that is the highest it's been in a while. It's at 5.4%. Will it stay that way? Well, stay tuned and we'll find out and see what the economic winds have with that. I know there's quite a few folks out there saying that they're expecting rates at the least not to increase in the next few months. So we'll see what happens with that. Since we did get the bulk of our contributions for the second quarter in for July, I just wanted to share this graph that shows contributions by quarter. The most recent quarter is this one for $118 million. That's the second yellow one. That is 6.5% more than the $110.9 million that was received for the same quarter last year. And so that translates year to date. Our contributions are 5.4% higher through the first half of the year, calendar year, than they were the year before. So the contributions are trending pretty much as they have been in the past. All that leads to that our contribution balance at the end of July was just under $645 million. And most of that money is invested, like I said, in the short-term investment fund account. So total assets for the authority are just under $671 million. And the liabilities continue to be the amounts we owe for the bond funds, totaling just about $12.8 million, 1.6 of that due in the next 12 months. And that's why it's short term. That's what's happening at the authority from a financial standpoint. Does anyone have any questions at this time? Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dave. Is there any old business that anybody would like to discuss? Don't see any. Any new business? Not seeing any. So may I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Thank
I'll
you. And a
second that.
second? Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so our meeting is, or the motion carries, and then our meeting is adjourned today. The time is 10:47. I hope everybody has a good rest of the day, and I appreciate you coming online for this special time this week.
Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Take good
everyone.
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you.